Okay, here we go. Lesson 1, algebraic expressions. So on page 349, you'll start to see there's some vocab words that pop up. You see them highlighted in yellow. And these are ones that we've started to talk about, right? So we talked about a variable. We talked about an algebraic expression. Also on this page, just to the right here, we talked about the essential question yesterday. So how can you use numbers and symbols to represent mathematical ideas? So we'll see that throughout the chapter. And by the end of the chapter, you should be able to answer that. We're going to keep scrolling a little bit. And the top of page 350. So again, we have started to see this vocabulary. It talks about evaluating an algebraic expression. And it talks about just algebra. It says the branch of mathematics that involves expressions with variables is called algebra. And so in algebra, the multiplication sign is often omitted, which is important to understand because when we start evaluating expressions next, you'll definitely see your expressions with multiplication written in this way. And what I mean by that is the number and the variable are right next to each other. For example, 6D. It just means 6 times D. You don't see the multiplication sign in between the number and the variable. The next one, 9ST. 9 times S times T. MN. M times N. And then A to the third power means A times A times A. You take whatever the value is of A and you multiply it by itself 3 times. So again, that'll be important as we do some examples next. We talked about coefficient. And so if I go back up here and I look at these examples, 6 is the coefficient in front of that D. 9 is the coefficient in front of that S. 1 is the coefficient in front of the M that you don't see there. 1 is also the coefficient in front of the A that you don't see there. So let's take a look at some examples. Now, the examples that the book shows, 1, 2, and 3 here, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I just want to point out that as we do these, you're going to see an expression like number 1 says evaluate 2 times, and in parentheses, n plus 3, if n equals -4. So you're going to be using some substitution to help you evaluate these expressions. And so we're going to do that using order of operations. So you see this little sticky note off to the left here. You need to go through these expressions when we evaluate and always keep order of operations in the back of your mind. That's why yesterday you had to do a couple of reminder lessons through BuzzMath, because if you don't, you're going to evaluate the expressions incorrectly. And so when we evaluate expressions, we're talking about PEMDAS. So let me get my pen here. And I'm just going to write that off to the side. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Now that's an acronym that I would use. That's how I would remember it when I went through elementary school, middle school. That's how I was taught. You may have been given a different way to remember that. But essentially, you're using P for parentheses, E for exponents, M multiply, D divide, and you do that in order from left to right, depending on how it appears. And then A for addition, S for subtraction. And again, you work that left to right. So you have to keep this in mind as you work through your evaluating expressions. So we're going to start with the got it's here. And you'll see it says evaluate each expression if C equals 8 and D equals -5. So we're in the got it. We're on the bottom of page 350. We're going to work through these together right now. So your first one for letter A says C minus 3. So what we're going to do is go back up and understand that C is 8. And so I'm going to just work these out here below. So I'm going to put that 8 in for C and then minus 3. So I'm evaluating. I'm substituting that 8 in. 8 minus 3 tells me I have an answer of 5. So for letter A, your answer is 5. And we don't put C equals 5. Remember, these aren't equations. These are expressions. And so when you are given values to substitute into the variables, all you're doing is evaluating it, and you're coming up with one numeric answer, which could be positive or negative. Let's look at letter B. 15 minus C. Okay, so I'm going to use C again. So I'm going to start to evaluate this. 15 minus, and I'm going to take that 8 and put it in for C. 15 minus 8. Well, that would be 7. Right? So for letter B, when I evaluate that expression, I have an answer of 7. Letter C. So notice so far we've got all positives going on here. 3 times C plus D, so in parentheses. So C plus D, C is 8, plus D is negative 5. Okay, so now we're going to work with some integer rules here. We've got a negative value, and we have parentheses, which also means we need to think about order of operations. Your parentheses have to come first, okay? Now, in addition to that, before I keep going, this 3 on the outside of the parentheses, that means you're going to take whatever value you get inside the parentheses and multiply it by 3. You don't see that multiplication sign, but when you see a number outside the parentheses, it does mean multiplication. So I'm going to take and put a little circle there to indicate multiplication. But again, the parentheses have to go first, okay? So we're going to take the 8 plus negative 5, and with our integer rules, we're going to remember if I have $8 and I spend 5 of it, that means I only have $3 left, right? A positive and a negative. If I have opposite signs, I need to subtract and take the sign of the larger number. 8 is larger and it's positive. I have a positive answer, positive 3. So using those integer rules that you learned in chapter 3. Now I'm going to take that 3 and I'm now going to finish my order of operations and I'm going to multiply it by the 3 on the outside. 3 times 3, I have an answer, final answer of 9. So letter C, after I've evaluated that expression, final answer of 9. Letter D, 2C minus 4D. Okay, so 2 times C, so let's look at that. C is 8. 2 times 8, 2 times C, minus 4 times D. D is negative 5. Okay, so I tried to space this out a little bit here so you can see it with understanding. You're going to take the 2 and multiply it by the C value of 8. You're going to take the 4 and multiply it by the D value of negative 5. And then you're going to subtract. So when I say that, I'm talking about order of operations, right? We're going to take and use our multiplication first before we do anything with subtraction. 2 times 8, 16. Okay, minus. Okay, so we're not subtracting yet. Multiplication comes before subtraction. 4 times negative 5. So when you multiply and you have one value, one number that is negative, your answer is negative. 4 times a negative 5 is negative 20. So now what you're left with is 16 minus a negative 20. Oh, so we actually now have a subtraction integer problem that we have to do LCO. Leave, change, opposite. It's now going to become, leave the 16, change to addition. Opposite of negative 20 is positive 20. This now becomes 16 plus positive 20, which now gives you an answer of 36. Letter D, after you evaluate the expression with the negatives and positives combined, you have an answer of 36. Letter E. Okay, so D minus C squared. Let's see if I can, might run out of room. I'm going to take this up a little bit here. Letter E. D is negative 5. Minus c squared. C is 8. And it's squared. So thinking in terms of order of operations again. Okay. I know right now, I don't have parentheses, but I do have an exponent. I have 8 squared here. This has to be evaluated first. When you square a number, remember it's multiplying it by itself. 8 times 8, 64. Okay, now I can look at the rest of the problem. I still have my -5, and then I need to now subtract 64. Took care of my exponent. Now I can do my subtraction. Well, I'm working with negatives again. And because I'm working with negatives, I have to do that leave change opposite. LCO. Leave the -5, change subtraction to addition, and the opposite of positive 64 is now -64. So I need to wrap this up. I've got 2 negatives that I'm adding together, -5 plus a -64. So that's saying I have borrowed $5 from you, and guess what? I need some more money. I'm going to actually borrow another $64 from you. I owe you $69. -69. So when you have 2 negatives, the integer rule is you add together and it stays negative. Keep the sign, -69, letter E. Okay, last one, letter F. So 2d squared plus 5d. Okay, 2 times d squared. D is -5. Now what I'm doing is I'm just putting that in parentheses because I've got a lot going on here. I've got a multiplication sign. I've got a negative value that I have to square. So I want you to see it clearer. 2 times d squared. 2 times d, -5, squared. Plus 5 times d. Ooh, d is -5. So this is a big evaluating expression problem here. And that's okay. We'll take it little by little. And let's see what we do and how we do. So we got to think, is there parentheses? Well, I added parentheses, right? But there's nothing inside that parentheses but except for one value, -5. Exponents. Yes, I do have this exponent. I got to take care of this exponent right here. And so that means I need to do -5 times -5. -5 times -5. That's a positive 25. 2 negatives, when you multiply, equals a positive. Again, that's your multiplication integer rules. 2 negatives equal a positive. -5 times -5, positive 25. Okay, so I'm going to write the rest of this problem down here. I've still got times 2. I still have plus in the middle here. And I also have this 5 times -5. Okay, again, now multiplication comes before addition. I have to complete that multiplication first. So I'm going to do 2 times 25 here and get 50, both positives. I'm going to do the 5 times -5 on the other side of the adding sign. That's 1 negative, 1 positive. The integer rule says when you multiply 1 negative and 1 positive, it's negative. So -25. Multiplication's done. Now I can use my adding integer rules. 50 plus a -25. Okay, I have $50. I spend 25 of it. That means I only have $25 left. 1 positive, 1 negative. Opposite signs subtract. Sign of the larger value, which is 50, and it's positive, positive 25. Your final answer for letter F is a positive 25. Now, that one's hard. For sure, that one's hard. And so that's okay. It's good to look at those and be challenged. You're most likely going to see problems like letter A, letter B, letter C, letter D, and possibly E. F's going to be your tough one, okay? So we're going to keep going and try a few more. We're going to scroll down and look at guided practice. And so keep going. And we're going to look on page 352. Okay, so let's take a look at guided practice. We're going to do a couple of these together as well. And again, this is page 352. So number one, actually, let me read the directions first. Evaluate each expression if m equals 2, n equals 6, and p equals a negative 4. So number one says 3m plus 4p. And so 3 times m plus 4 times p. That means we're going to do 3 times, and we're going to look up here. M is 2. 3 times 2 plus 4 times the value of p, which is negative 4. 4 times negative 4. Now again, order of operations. Multiplication comes before adding. So we're going to do our 3 times 2 and get 6. And we're going to do our 4 times negative 4. And remember, when you multiply one negative, it stays negative. Negative 16. So now the last part of wrapping up, you're evaluating the expression, is adding. So 6 plus a negative 16. You have opposites here. And so when you have opposite signs, I should say, you subtract. So 16 minus 6 is 10. And you take the sign of the larger number. 16 is larger. It has a negative next to it, negative 10. So when you evaluate this expression here, you have a final answer of negative 10. Number 2, n squared plus 5. N, well, that's 6. And you're going to square it, plus 5. So don't forget, when you square a value, it's multiplying it by itself. So it's not 6 times 2, it's 6 times 6. Multiply it by itself, 36. Do those exponents first. And then you're going to add 5. Both positive, 36 plus 5 equals 41. Oops, sorry, that was a little messy. There it is. Okay, next one, number 3. 6 times p cubed. 6 times p is negative 4 cubed. So we have an exponent. So thinking about order of operations, this has to come first. And so if we're going to take negative 4 and cube it, it looks like this. Negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4. You have to multiply it by itself 3 times. And each of those times, make sure the negative is with the 4. Negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4. Okay, so let's do the first two. Negative 4 times negative 4. When you multiply two negatives together, you get a positive. Positive 16. 16, right here, times negative 4. Okay. Well, now when we multiply two numbers together and one number is negative, the answer is negative. And then multiply those two together. 16 times 4. And I really haven't said anything much about a calculator. Really, we've been able to do a lot of these in our head. So I'm just going to scratch it out here. 6 times 4, 24, 64. And so that gives us negative 64 here. Okay, well, we're not done. So, oops, and I have an extra, get rid of that, negative 64. So you still have all the way back up top times 6. Okay. So again, I haven't said anything about a calculator. You can use one at this point. Honestly, this is also going to be an example of a problem that you probably won't see on the quick check on Friday. This is higher than I want it to be, and that's okay. It's good practice. And when you do the quick check on Friday, you really won't need a calculator. I'll keep them very, very small, like number 1 and number 2. Let's finish this one out. So 6 times negative 64, if I were to take and multiply those two together, I'm going to get 384. Now, one of those is negative. When you multiply two values together and one is negative, your answer is negative 384. Okay, so I'm going to have you try a few. You're going to go down to independent practice, and you're going to do the ones specifically I share with you, not all of them. I would like for you to try number 3, number 4, number 6, number 7, and number 9. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those that you're going to try here. And then I will have a link for you to, actually, we'll do it instead where you pause the video and you can come back and check your answers. That's probably the easiest way. So try those 5, pause it, right? Come back, check your answers on those. And then if you happen to get those done and you feel good when you've checked your answers, then what I'd like you to try, and this is more of a challenge, right? These are decimal problems here on the next page, which is page 354. Try 13, 14, and 15. And so these are small decimals, and honestly, they're all positives. And even in the problems themselves for 13, 14, and 15, these are all positive values. So if you'd like the challenge, try these. I will also provide an answer key for these. So again, you'll pause the video, try them, check your answers, okay? So the ones for sure that you should be working on are the ones in independent practice that we just circled. And if you want that challenge, you're going to come down here and do these 3. I will show answers for all at the end of this video. So the last thing before I really kind of sign off today with you is after this is done, what you should do is take a look at Math, Google Classroom. And I think I just closed out of that. And so when you go to 7th grade math, you're going to see under classwork, I am going to be scheduling your quizzes, the practice. There's 2 of them. And it's just practice. These are the links. There's 2 links for you to go in and just practice evaluating expressions. They're not due. It's not an assignment grade. It's practice. So really what's going to happen is on Friday when you have your quick check, that is a grade in Schoology. It always is. This is just the extra practice to get through and make sure you're comfortable with doing evaluating expressions, okay? So when you finish here, check your answers and then head into Google Classroom Quiz Is. Wednesday is Alex, and so Mr. Whalen is going to teach on Thursday and Friday. So I will actually see you next week. Have a great day. Okay, here are your answers. I'm just going to scroll very slowly. You can pause the video if you need to. There's the top independent practice ones. And there's, I said, the challenge problems on the next page. See you tomorrow.